Hi, I'm the History Guy. I have a degree in history and I love history, and if you love history too, this is the channel for you. This weekend represents the traditional beginning of summer in the United States, the three-day weekend known as Memorial Day weekend. But of course, Memorial Day was not created as a holiday to mark the start of summer. It was created as the time that the nation sets aside to remember its war dead. It is a tradition with a long and powerful history that deserves to be remembered. The origins of Memorial Day, which was originally called Decoration Day, are actually a matter of some dispute, but there are parts of the story that are agreed upon. The first nationwide observance of the day was in 1868. John Alexander Logan, a major general in the Union Army during the Civil War, and in 1868, Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic, a fraternal order of Civil War Union veterans, issued a proclamation calling for a Decoration Day to be observed annually and nationwide as a day to decorate the graves of Civil War dead, both Union and Confederate. The date of the observance was chosen to be May 30th, because that was a day that was not the anniversary of any major battle of the war, and yet flowers to decorate the graves would be in bloom all across the country. On that first nationally recognized Decoration Day in 1868, events were held in 183 cemeteries in 27 states. After the First World War, the meaning of the day was changed to memorialize all Americans who died in the service of their country rather than just Civil War dead. It wasn't until after the Second World War that the name was more commonly recognized as Memorial Day rather than Decoration Day. In 1972, the date was officially changed to the last Monday in May rather than always occurring on May 30th. This was a part of an act of Congress that moved several holidays to always occur on Mondays so as to maximize three-day weekends for federal employees. That decision is still controversial. Some people argue that by always making Memorial Day a three-day weekend, it changed the meaning of the day so that now it is more of a leisure time to celebrate the beginning of summer rather than a somber time set aside to remember the nation's war dead. There are several competing claims as to which community began the idea of a Decoration Day. In fact, more than 24 communities in both the North and the South lay claim to the idea that they were the first community to set aside community time to decorate Civil War graves. The sheer number of Americans killed during this period led to many acts of community mourning. One candidate for the genesis of the holiday has been advanced by Yale University historian David Blight, who uncovered lost evidence of an event in Charleston, South Carolina on May the 1st of 1865. February 15th of 1865, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard ordered the evacuation of Confederate forces from the city of Charleston in the face of the campaign of Union General William Tecumseh Sherman. The city's white population had largely evacuated, but thousands of black former slaves remained. Symbolically, the first Union troops to enter the city were black troops of the 21st Infantry Regiment and the 55th Massachusetts Infantry. On May the 1st, black workmen dug up and then properly reinterred the bodies of 257 Union soldiers who had died in a Confederate prisoner of war camp in Charleston, and who had been improperly buried in a hastily dug mass grave. The memorial was then celebrated by a parade of school children, citizens, and Union soldiers. Thus, Blight argues, Memorial Day was founded by African Americans in a ritual of remembrance and consecration that represented the fact that the Civil War was a victory of emancipation over a slaveholding republic. When the white aristocracy returned to Charleston, memory of the event was actively suppressed, and it essentially was lost to history until Blight rediscovered it in old period newspapers. While there's clear record that the event occurred and it was undoubtedly important, the problem with Blight's claim that it was the foundation of Memorial Day is that it wasn't well known throughout the country, and thus was not likely to have inspired Logan to create the National Annual Remembrance in 1868. Still, it is an important part of the U.S. Memorial Day tradition, and it deserves to be remembered. For its part, in 1966, Congress officially recognized Waterloo, New York, as the first community to set aside a community-wide annual observance of a day dedicated to honoring the war dead, starting in 1866. The problem is the Waterloo story is difficult to prove, and some historians argue that that Waterloo story is more legend than fact. Regardless of where the tradition started, one important part of the history of Memorial Day in the United States is the significant difference in the way that the day was celebrated in the North versus the South in the period immediately following the Civil War. While the North tended to focus on the idea that the Union soldiers had sacrificed themselves in the cause of freedom, celebrations in the South increasingly turned towards supporting a set of beliefs referred to as the lost cause of the Confederacy. The idea of the lost cause minimized the role of slavery as a cause of the war, and presented the Southern cause as a defense of an idyllic way of life from intrusion. Confederate soldiers and leaders were presented as if they were chivalric knights fighting against overwhelming odds. The tradition of commemorating war dead allowed an opportunity to reinforce this set of beliefs. The idea of the lost cause is significant in post-war America. While most historians agree that it reinforced white supremacist attitudes and helped a Southern elite reestablish power, there's also wide agreement that the philosophy helped to heal over, or at least plaster over, the wounds of the war during the difficult period of Reconstruction, and helped to move the nation back to unity of purpose, which would be required to face the challenges of the coming century. The narrative, however, ignored many historical realities, and that can be seen in modern conflicts today over things like the display of the Confederate battle flag and Confederate monuments. What it most means to this historian is that the issues that drove the conflict of the U.S. Civil War did not just magically disappear when the Confederate armies surrendered. And the fact that those issues are still around today is all the more reason why we should learn and know the history that is intertwined with the way that our nation commemorates its war dead. Memorial Day is unique in the way that Americans understand our history. It is a rare day that is set aside for Americans to remember their history, and yet its cause and date harken back to the most divisive period in our history. And yet it also symbolizes the sacrifice and heroism on behalf of our most revered values, the shared values that ground our national identity. Perhaps the best way to understand Memorial Day is to understand the flag tradition of Memorial Day. By tradition, on the morning of Memorial Day, the United States flag is briskly drawn to the top of the staff, and then solemnly lowered to half-staff, in recognition of the more than 1 million men and women who sacrificed their lives in the service of our country. But then, at noon, the flag is again drawn to the top of the staff, as a symbol that the living are resolute in not allowing that the sacrifice of our war dead will have been in vain, and a promise that we will rise up in their stead and continue the fight for the cause of liberty and justice. This edition of 5 Minutes of History is dedicated to my great-uncle, George Maness, who I never got to meet, although I dearly would have liked to have. One of America's 1 million war dead, one of the people that we remember on Memorial Day.